After many years, Queen Mahamaya became pregnant. She and her husband were very happy about it. On the full moon day in the month of May, she gave birth to the divine soul in Lumbini Park while she was on her way to see her parents. The beautiful flowers started blooming all around. Negativity started taking down his origins. Everyone was very happy to see the baby and asked for the wise men's advice. Everyone believed that the baby will soon become the wisest of them all. Everyone was very happy about the birth of the purest one, but 2 days after his name-giving ceremony, Devi Mahamaya died of illness. Everyone was sad, including King Wuddodana. Wise men previously advised King to keep Siddhartha out of any pain and discomfort. They had predicted that if the prince saw someone old, someone sick, a dead person, and a monk, he would want to leave the palace and become a monk himself. Instead of being a prince, listening to them, his feelings started horrifying him. The queen's sister Prayapati Gautami took care of the baby prince with as much emotion and tenderness as if he were her own son. Prince Siddhartha was a healthful and delightful boy. He liked to learn and found it easy to study and was the most skillful in his class and the ablest at games. He was always thoughtful to others and was beloved among his friends. This is the most innocent part of the life history of Gautam Buddha's story. From childhood, Siddhartha was different from others in the age of being playful. He started noticing the sufferings and hardship of life. When he was too small, he felt pity for the small creatures around him. One day, one of his friends was trying to hurt a snake. Siddhartha stopped the kid from hurting the snake and advised him to stop being cruel to creatures. Another instance, when he saw his cousin's brother hurting a swan, his brother Prince Devadatta shot a swan with an arrow, but Siddhartha took the swan, provided all his attention and care. When the swan started getting better, he let it fly in the sky. One afternoon, his father took him to the annual plowing festival. The king began the ceremony by starting the first pair of exquisitely decorated bullocks. Siddhartha sat down under a rose-apple tree and saw everyone. He marked that while people were blissfully enjoying themselves, the bullocks had to work terribly hard and plow the field. They did not look happy at all. He also witnessed the life cycle of creatures, how a lizard ate an ant, then it is eaten by a snake, and the snake is thereafter eaten by an eagle. He assumed that all the pleasure he behold in our life is just for some period. It gradually finishes up with suffering. When Siddhartha saw what's happening all around, he sat under a tree and started thinking deeply. When King and the maid saw him sitting under a tree, cross-legged in deep meditation, they started worrying about his future. King decided to make a place full of joy and comfort for Siddhartha inside the palace. The king did not want his son to think about the deep things in life too much, because he remembered that the wise men had predicted that his son might one day want to leave the palace and become a monk. But this did not stop Siddhartha from thinking about the sufferings and unhappiness that he noticed around him. Siddhartha grew up to be a handsome young man full of strength. To stop Siddhartha from thinking about the outer world, the king arranged his marriage to his beautiful cousin, Princess Yasodhara. As per the traditional belief, Siddhartha had to prove his worth before her parents. They organized a ceremony in which Siddhartha was being told to tame a wild horse. Siddhartha tamed the horse not by beating it, as some suitors might, but by talking to the horse to calm it and stroking it gently. Yasodhara wanted to marry the prince, and no one else. They were married in a great ceremony. To stop the prince from thinking about unhappiness or leaving home, King Uddodana created a pleasure palace for Siddhartha and Yasodhara. Dancers and singers were asked to entertain them, and only healthy and young people were allotted into the palace, tend the palace garden. The king did not want Siddhartha to know that everybody gets sick, grows old, and eventually will die, but in spite of the king's efforts, the prince was not happy. He wanted to know what life was like for people who lived outside the palace walls. Finally, after some time, the king allowed Siddhartha to go out and attend his people, as he was going to become the king soon. And he should understand everything about his kingdom and his people. He went with his attendant, Channa. On his first visit, Siddhartha witnessed a white-haired, wrinkled man dressed in shreds. Such a sight shocked him, as he had never seen anyone old before. Channa told him that this man was old, and that everyone will become old one day. Siddhartha felt frightened by that and asked Channa to take him back home. At night he could not sleep, and he kept on imagining old age. On his next visit, he saw a man lying on the ground and moaning. Out of sympathy, he rushed over to the man. Channa alerted him that the man was sick and that everyone, even noble people like Siddhartha or the king, could get sick. On the third visit, Siddhartha and Channa saw 4 men carrying another man on a stretcher. Channa told Siddhartha that the man was dead and was going to be cremated. He also said that no one can escape death, and told the prince that everyone will die one day. When they returned to the palace, Siddhartha kept on thinking about what he had seen. Finally, he made a strong decision to find a way out of the misery of old age, sickness, and death. Some time later, while the prince was riding in the garden, he noticed a man in a yellow robe. He noticed that the man looked very peaceful and happy. Channa described to him that the man was a monk. The monk had left his family and give up his desire for pleasures to search for freedom from worldly suffering. The prince felt inspired by the sight of the monk and began to want to leave home to search for freedom in the same way. Siddhartha Gautama leaves home one night when everyone in the palace was sleeping. Siddhartha requested Channa to prepare his horse, Kanthaka. In the meantime, he went into the room where Yasodhara and their newborn boy Rahula slept. He was filled with loving kindness towards them and pledged himself that he would come back to see them. But first, he had to understand why all creatures suffer and find out how they could escape from suffering. In the silence of the night, Prince Siddhartha mounted Kanthaka. Accompanied by Channa, he left the palace and the city of Kapilavastu. They halted at a river some distance from the city and the prince took off his rich attire and put on the robes of a monk. Then he told Channa to take the horseback to the palace. At first, both Channa and Kanthaka denied going back, but Siddhartha ordered that he had to go on alone. With tears rolling down his face, Kanthaka watched as the prince walked out of sight. This part of the Buddha story is the turning period of the story of Gautam Buddha.